Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Top Lessons podcast. I am your host, Kathy Inglot, and with me today I have a special guest, the CEO and co-founder of Accern. His name is Kumesh Aroomoogan. Welcome, Kumesh. Thank you so much for being here with me today.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. I'm super excited.
I'm excited too. And for those of you that have not heard of Accern yet, you will love it by the end of this podcast. And you will go and check out the website and check out Kumesh's bio as well. But we're going to name some of his accomplishments. He is by far someone who looks much younger. Something in the water, but at the same time, he has many accomplishments already to his name. So without further ado, not only are you CEO, but you're also a co-founder of one of the biggest AI and finance transformative generative AI platforms. You have an amazing story, and I'm going to let you tell this story. But before that, I'm going to list some of your accomplishments. Forbes recognized you as one of the 30 under 30 list of enterprise technology companies. Now, you also were named by Fast Company for your impact, and they placed you on the top 50 next big things in tech and the top 50 for next big things in fintech CEOs. So to say the least, you have accomplished quite a lot, but you're not done yet. You created a platform that enables finance companies to transform and spearhead generative AI. Now, you did this in 2014. 2014 is 10 years ago. You did it before the hype of AI and how sexy it is now. So if you can take us back to 2014 and the idea of Accern, how it started, what was the garage-like idea?
Right.
Tell us about the idea behind Accern and how it became what it is today.
Yeah, kind of like taking you back. So it started with when I was working at Citigroup. So at Citi, I was an equity research analyst. I was there for like less than a year.
Yeah.
But essentially what I had to do was go on Bloomberg, FactSet, all these different platforms, doing research on public equities, copying and pasting from different platforms like Bloomberg and FactSet.
Which we all do all the time.
Exactly. Into my Excel sheet over and over again.
Yeah.
It was super manual, super tedious, boring. And I was like, how do I automate my entire job with AI or software?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how the idea came about in terms of workflow automation for financial services. It was like, the work that I was doing was extremely boring. I just don't want to do it anymore.
Amen.
What can we do to improve this?
Now, I'm going to stop you here, which is way ahead of the time of what we're all doing now, right? You did this when AI was, it was already there. It was a concept.
Yeah.
People knew artificial intelligence, but they weren't really doing it as a business. And all the venture capitalist firms that are now going to AI companies to say, I'm gonna trust you and I'm gonna put my money behind you. You were doing it when people were like, what is it?
Right, exactly. I mean, and I've seen over the last 10 years how it grew from people doing a lot of manual work in banking to now going to like no-code platforms, automated workflow, and now AI agents that's automatically doing the work for them. So it was a crazy growth in the last 10 years.
Some of the lessons that Kumesh will share are transformative because he did something where he was literally thinking outside the box. We all know how outside the box thinking is, but he actually put the results behind it. Now, I call it the H.E.R approach, which is the hard work, it's the energy, and the results. And you literally did all three really well to now have a 9-figure company behind you. You took an idea and you did it non-traditionally. Describe to everyone how you did it, how you put a website out there, and what the demand was.
Yeah, so after I had the idea in general, I met my co-founder and CTO, Anshul, at NYU. And essentially we were like, hey, let's do this company together. We didn't have an office, we didn't have a team, it was just me and him. And we were living in Queens at that time. So it was
Shout out to Queens.
So we were literally in my basement in Queens, New York. And we built the website in such a way that it looked like we were a very large company. And we essentially built a website with the goal of putting out our idea there to see who will be attracted to this idea.
Yeah.
Like, are there any potential customers that's out there? We didn't have a product or anything. So it was kind of like a marketing piece. And little did we know, the largest hedge fund in New York City, and was the head of data at that fund, reached out to us on the website. And he was like, hey, you got a cool product, can we get a demo? We don't have a product. So
yeah, you had to keep that in your back pocket, right?
Exactly. So we picked up the phone, called the guy. He was extremely supportive with entrepreneurs. And he was like, hey, I'm going to help you guys out. I'm going to connect you to essentially he kind of walked us through the MVP requirements of what the product needs to be. And he connected us with the right data vendors and so forth for us to really get the data to build out the product.
Yeah.
And so we had the blueprint of what exactly this large quantitative hedge fund wants. And like out of all the customers we can serve, we're now talking to the most technical type of customer in the world, which are quantitative hedge funds.
Yeah.
They're like above everyone in terms of technology. And so we had the blueprint. Now we were like, all right, how do we execute to make this happen? Yeah. We don't have any employees. We didn't even know how to really build this ourselves. So we had to recruit 2 people from Anshul's classroom in terms of building this out. So it was the 4 of us, and we didn't have money to pay these employees. So it was just sweat equity at that time.
Oh, I love it. When you have friends that are there for you, and even strangers, right?
Yeah.
In most cases, that are seeing your vision and know that you're onto something, and they know that they'll get the end result, pay out, speaks volumes of the type of people that are, around you.
Right, exactly. And so it was the 4 of us. We went on Wall Street because we wanted an office there, but we didn't have money to pay for an office. So for some reason, we somehow negotiated with the landlord to say, hey, can you give us 6 months deferred rent? We're not going to pay rent.
Dream.
Give us 6 months deferred rent. We're going to close our customer. We're going to pay you guys the office rent. And
again, thinking outside the box, right?
Yeah.
Because you're like, look, if I don't ask, I won't get.
Exactly. And we wanted an office because it will make us feel like, hey, we're actually onto something, versus everyone just working from home, working from different places. We want everyone to be together. We signed that deal with 6 month deferred rent. We're locked in. Now we actually have to get a customer to make that payment. So that kind of also drove us to really succeeding. And so we were all in together in the office. We basically built out the entire MVP and prototype that the fund needs. We gave it to them. They tested out. They loved it. And they became our first paying customer. And they give us the first check, which was the largest amount of cash we have ever seen in our lives. So
love it. Again, this story has so many inspirational, comments to it, but also the lessons in that story. You did it so untraditionally. You went from, I need an office because that's where you will work together.
Right.
You said, we can't afford it, but we'll find a way to pay for it.
Right.
You went to a client without a product.
Right.
And truthfully, I think it speaks a lot about the client and your potential because they walked you through the process. Yeah. They got you in the door and they almost mentored you to make the product for them. And obviously the product worked because you're here 10 years later.
Exactly.
And your growth potential has been, endless. And you have obviously many other clients to your names. Most of them are top tier hedge funds.
Yes.
And for those of you in the hedge fund world, you may have already heard of Accern many times before this podcast, and you're saying you're one of them. So yes, Kumesh is here for that reason because he is such a great story. And I say this comment to many of my network people, and I say this to the younger generation too. You're a see it, be it moment. People look at you and you're like, oh, you look a little younger than most, but you've been doing this for 10 years. You started in your basement.
Right.
No one handed you a product and said, go sell it. Mm-hmm. You were that mind behind the product, but you also did it in the most unconventional way ever, right. Which is, for those of you that have that, he is that see it, be it moment, and a really inspirational CEO to say, if he did it, so can you with your idea. You just need that result. You need to follow it up with results because you may have the brightest idea in your head, but if you're not going to put it to paper and put it to people that trust you and build it with you, you're not going to get anything out of it.
Right.
So we're going to move on to another lesson because I know this lesson resonates with all of you in being an entrepreneur. The lesson of capital raising. Walk us through, because you've raised over $40 million in capital raises. Walk us through that unconventional, untraditional way that you did it, but also in how you sold those potential investors. Because again, AI wasn't sexy 10 years ago.
Right. That's a lot of story.
Give us the quick version.
Yeah. So back then, Silicon Valley has always been the capital hub, but New York was still coming up back in 2016, 2015.
Yeah.
So it wasn't flooded by VC. So it was very difficult to raise capital. Yeah. And we didn't have any connections or anything. We just had that one customer that we had, and we started pitching to a lot of VCs. And we went to the top tier VCs first, then we went to tier 2, tier 3. Everyone passed. They were like, hey, we want to see more traction. And obviously VCs never define what traction is. Yeah. So a first-time entrepreneur is like, what is traction? We have no idea what traction is. Yeah. And so we kept pitching, and we pitched to hundreds of VCs, and everyone passed. Essentially, we were like, all right, what can we do to raise capital? Like,
Yeah.
what exactly is there? And we had one of the best law firm that was representing us, H.E.R. And luckily they took us pro bono because
Again, another unconventional way.
Like we literally reached out to the top law firm. We're like, hey, we can't pay you, but can you represent
Trust
us?
us.
Exactly. We're going to do big things.
Yeah.
They were like, all right, we're going to take a percent of your company.
Okay.
And that's it.
Which is normal, right?
Yeah.
If you want sweat equity in it, you have to have some give and take
Exactly.
into that relationship because
Exactly.
people, like a piece of the pie.
Yeah.
In the entrepreneur landscape, like you said, you've heard so many no's.
Mm-hmm.
What made you keep going?
It was that we wanted to succeed at the end of the day. There was nothing that's going to stop us from not doing that. We just had a drive and a mission that we wanted to just make it.
I love it. For those of you listening, drive and mission. You need to have it.
Yeah. So nothing was going to stop us. We're going to always find a way to get it done. And so with the capital raise, a lot of people passed. We were like, all right, what do we do now?
Yeah.
And so our law firm was like, why don't you issue your own term sheet? And
Love it.
We were like, wait, we can do that. And a lot of entrepreneurs don't know they can do that.
Yeah.
So we issue our own term sheet. We set the amount that we want to raise. We set the valuation. And then I was pitching the startup at a lot of different pitch events. And one of this investor approached me at the end. His name is Mashi. And he was like, hey, I love what you guys are doing. I want to help you out. And we met up a few times after. And he was like, hey, I love what you're doing. I'm going to introduce you to a few investors.
Yep.
And within 1 week, we closed our seed round.
Nice.
And it was very smooth. And essentially that capital allowed us to basically scale the company, build new products, hire people. And we started getting a lot of media attention after that seed round. So that's kind of when things scale.
I've been on your LinkedIn page and you have a lot of media support behind you. The articles mentioning Accern there's a plethora of them.
Mm-hmm.
And it speaks volumes into how much you've built since 2014.
Yeah.
The lessons were hard, right? The
Mm-hmm.
no's were there.
Yeah.
You also had products which you started from scratch. You weren't taking something off the shelf that was already there.
Right.
Now there are a lot of companies now that are doing that because they're replicating what other companies have done.
Mm-hmm.
You were at that forefront where you're like, if I could do this small thing, I could do it and then another pivot and another product. It speaks volumes to those of you that are out there that if you find one investor that likes you and believes in you, that other investors, you just kind of need that hook
Mm-hmm.
to get in there and push your way through the door. I have this statement, it's a requote of Albert Einstein. It says, if you don't go in through the door, go in through the window.
Right.
It's like you make your way in no matter how. Just push your way in because you know you have a good product and you can sell it. You just need someone else on the other side to know your vision and trust your mission, like you said. Being in the VC world, there's this plethora of requirements you somehow need to meet. And to all the VCs out there, make your lives a little easier. There's plenty of people like Kumesh and, who hear no's, but then you later on are like, oh, I should have invested in you. And you're like, give them a little bit of a runway, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to give them 100 million out the door, but you can give them that 1 or 2 million to help them. Right. And, and your profit could be 10x that or 100x, in a few years. So, a lot of founders don't ask for a lot of money beginning. Mm-hmm. They ask for a little bit to, grow and expand. But, you miss out on those opportunities because, again, they have all those crazy requirements sometimes that they're like, oh, you don't meet this box.
Right.
And you're like, well, I never started in the box. I was always outside.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now you could tell them, well, you should have invested.
Exactly.
The one thing that, we talked about earlier is capital raises.
Right.
And how hard it is to raise capital.
Very.
The no's are a plethora. Mm-hmm. But also, one of the lessons you shared with me that you learned is how fast cash goes.
Oh, yeah. Very.
It's like water, right? You turn on the faucet, the cash goes out the door.
Right. Exactly.
And you're always raising just to ensure that you always have more to support your employees, to pay the bills, and so on. So talk a little bit about the lesson you learned on cash management.
Right. I mean, when you first raise a seed round, no one really teaches you about cash management, especially as a first-time entrepreneur. So you have to figure that out on your own.
Yeah.
Unless you got backed by, let's say, a top-tier VC, then they're going to be looking at that and helping you that. But if you don't get backed and you just raise from a few investors, you're on your own.
Yeah.
So we had to learn that the hard way in terms of cash management, runway, and all these different things. But fast forward, we raised a ton of cash. One of the feedback I would give to entrepreneurs is raise as much capital as you can. That's going to last you for project out maybe 2-3 years instead of the 18 months of runway. Like 18 months, even though it looks long, it comes very fast. So like if you can raise cash for 2 to 3 years of runway, and if you have some sort of predictable revenue, maybe at the A or B stage, you can layer on some venture debt on top. And maybe like if you did a $5 million, $10 million round, get 10 to 20% of that in venture debt. And that's going to allow you to even extend the runway further on. So there's a lot of different mechanisms and so forth that I would start using if I were to do another company.
Yeah, and obviously you learn through your own lessons. And it's good to have, like you said, people who teach you and can tell you, hey, what about this?
Right.
And by the way, this is why I even started this podcast, is that people like you can share their lessons and say, hey, it's great to call yourself an entrepreneur, but there's so many, learning ways to get there that avoid what I needed to avoid and learn from me and take away my lessons to be able to get a better runway for yourself.
Right.
Like, what I hear through a lot of entrepreneurs is they say, I just need $1 million. Or that sweet spot's always $1 million to $2 or $3 million. And I think everyone says that number. And it really is funny how, like, in the beginning, everyone's like, I just need $2 million.
Right.
And you realize how fast $2 million goes. And the moment you hire employees, and employees are expensive. You either will have to pay them or you'll have to give them a piece of your company because no one's going to work for free. But you learn that very quickly that, paychecks go out the door, your money, the bucket gets less and less full, and you're back to raising again.
Right.
And you're back to asking people, hey, I'm doing this, and you're almost doing two things at the same time. Instead of doing the product and the building, you now have to spend half of your time raising and hoping that someone will believe in you again.
Yeah, exactly.
And you don't want to, you have a list of investors you have to show for. And you have to show a product so that they continue believing in you because they gave you money to begin with.
Right.
The ask is hard, but your lessons that you just shared are so, inspirational and so normal that you're like, don't do what I did. Ask for more money.
Right, exactly. And the other hard lesson that we learned as well, and I know a lot of entrepreneurs do this, they raise a lot of safe convertible notes and so forth. I'm kind of scarred now with safe and convertible notes because we have done it a lot. If you're a first-time entrepreneur or you're doing this your second time, I would structure this as equity rounds. So you do your seed round, raise as much capital as you need for the seed round, then do your Series A equity, then do your Series B and so forth. Versus what we did before was we did our seed round, and then we did a multiple different stages of safe notes and convertible notes that got converted into Series A at 2 years later, and then it hit everyone with massive dilution. Even though safes are very easy for you to raise and you get the money in, there's not much legal work and all that stuff, it becomes addictive to raise. And fast forward 2 years, you have now a bunch of safe that have to be converted. You're going to hit with dilution, or worse, if the company doesn't make it, you now owe all that in debt. So it's kind of scary.
It's a scary moment. And for investors, for entrepreneurs, you're not taught this in school.
Right.
You're not taught this by, most people who are been in your shoes. Some people are like, oh, you're off on your own. And you're like, no, I'm willing to share these lessons so that you don't commit the same mistakes I did.
Right.
Which is obviously the hope of the podcast, is that people learn from you and also, are inspired by how far you've come to be here today. Now, my last lesson of the day, and we talked about this, AI can be used in the most, amazing ways. It's efficient, it saves time, it is absolutely taking out the manual processes out of everyone's work. But AI is also the aspect of where does the integrity come in? I call it the other AI, artificial integrity, which is how do you ensure you know what the end user is using your data for?
Right.
And ensuring that the person that's giving you, the money for a venture is someone that is prestigious or has, a good intention to support you and give you their effort. How have you thought about AI in that aspect where the integrity part comes in?
Right. So especially with financial services, with banking, insurance, and asset management, there's heavy compliance there where they have to really document on how they're using this.
Yeah.
So we are not too worried about that aspect of it too much versus if we were selling to other industries, even like outside government of the United States, then that would be an issue. But for banking, we go through so many different compliance checks, making sure that the data that we're capturing is not coming from an illegal source.
Correct.
And so we have to always check those boxes. And we understand the end use case of the user. So when our user is using us, we know exactly what they're doing and how they're using us. So that's definitely something that we make sure we manage and we monitor. Like we would never give our product to a random organization that we don't know, and they're going to build a bunch of things and then sell that to some other countries.
Yeah. Because your name is on your product, right? Your Accern is out there, and you want that reputation to maintain the prestige that it has. And for those of you listening, my background is compliance, and I'm very well aware of how compliance matters in this sector. Because AI is, you're in the financial world, which is, as you described it, a lot safer if you're doing it the right way. But then there's this other aspect of AI, using facial recognition and doing all these things where, your personal data is being attached to it. And you go, how safe is that data? And what is it being used for? And some people just give data. They don't actually ask those due diligence questions about where is it going? Who's using it? What's the output for? Your data is in many cases where what you're paying for.
Right.
So those of you, out there, if you have an AI company or you're going into venture capital for an AI company, you have to ask those questions. You have to make sure that you're giving it so that the person using the data isn't illegally getting the data from some other source. And they're actually looking at the inputs so that your outputs are correct. And also, where are the outputs going? What are they being used for? Are they on the dark web, or are they being sold for some nefarious reason?
Exactly.
So I think the integrity part of AI is very important. And for, the lawyers out there and the compliance people out there, I was like, this is definitely an area that I think will be hot. We don't want to see it have headlines because then that means something went wrong.
Right.
But it does matter for those of you giving the capital to these firms to actually do the due diligence and not just trust that the AI company is going to do something amazing with it. So obviously, we have had a great discussion today with Kumesh, and I love the fact that he's here sharing his lessons because Accern, obviously, I think in my eyes was, transformative in how it started. The lesson of, doing a website and actually, looking at the product from the customer's perspective and saying, what do you need us to build is, I think the ultimate lesson of how good of an entrepreneur you are. But also, you got a lot of no's and you persevered. Right? The lesson of perseverance is one that you can, pat yourself on the back for and say, if I listened to all those people, I would have, shut it down and went to work for another big firm.
Right.
But you said, there's something here. I don't want to do manual work. And, obviously, fast forward to today's date, most people shouldn't be doing manual work anymore, right? If you have ChatGPT or Accern in your back pocket, you are no longer doing manual work. And if you are, there's something wrong with your use of AI. Again, Kumesh, thank you so much for being here. I look forward to our, 5-year look back to say what it is that has happened in 5 years and the transformation of Accern from now until then. Everyone go check out Accern and check out Kumesh on LinkedIn and through the bio that I will post. And, welcome to the AI evolution and the entrepreneurship lessons of the day. Thank you so much. I hope you like and subscribe, and I will see you soon.